Last week, Judiciary staff interviewed Jeffrey Rosen, Trump's former acting Attorney General, and Mr. Rosen's deputy at the Justice Department, Rich Donahue. These interviews were done as part of the Democrats' never-ending series of investigations into former President Trump. Their obsession with him has been very consistent. I'll give them that. So, too, are the Democrats' public comments that grossly mischaracterize, at least for now, the state of the evidence. I'll start with a little history. This country has had to deal with Democrats' obsession with destroying Trump for much too long. In the process, I fear my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have done and will do lasting damage to our political system. For example, in May 2017, then-ranking member Feinstein and I met with then-Director Comey about Crossfire Hurricane. At that classified briefing, Comey said Trump was not under investigation. But that didn't stop the Democrats from publicly saying that Trump was under investigation. And because Comey kept the answer classified, he couldn't and didn't rebut it. But Democrats knew it was a lie, and they kept on saying that lie until Trump fired Comey, because Comey wouldn't make the fact that Trump wasn't under investigation public. Unfortunately, the Democrats' big lie eventually got them what they wanted, because Comey then helped orchestrate an investigation over his firing. Day after day, year after year, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle misled the country about the true facts relating to the Crossfire Hurricane. In doing so, they undermined their credibility, but somehow they kept investigations going along with an all too supplicant press. My staff has participated in these staff-led interviews that have occurred in the last week, and I've been briefed on the matters at hand. I was also at the Rosen interview. Within hours of Saturday's Rosen interview, the Democrats were already on television and in papers talking about the substance of the interviews. In their public comments, they provided politically slanted mischaracterizations about where the investigation currently stands. And I'd like to specifically note that the chairman of the committee, Senator Durbin, said in part to CNN on Sunday about the Rosen interview that, quote, the Justice Department had set it up for us and said, we're waiving any privilege. He, meaning these people being interviewed, can speak to any issue. We're not holding back, end of quote. At the Donahue interview on Friday, the Justice Department, contrary to what I just stated to you, objected to my staff's questions on several occasions and prevented Donahue from answering. So, to go back to what I said from the quote on CNN, it had been set up for us and said we're waiving any privilege. He can speak to any issue. But when it comes to some of the questions my staff was asked, That wasn't true. The same happened at least once in the Rosen interview. And I believe the Justice Department made an objection even to a Democrat-led question in Donahue's interview. So we were not able to ask any questions as we were promised. So when the Democrats say these witnesses can, quote unquote, can speak to any issue, well, apparently that's not the case. The Biden administration and its Justice Department waived executive privilege for these witnesses to speak about close and intimate interviews that the president had with his advisors. If you get even a little bit away from Trump then in your questioning, well, then the Justice Department doesn't want Congress to know the facts. You see what I mean by saying Justice objected to some of my staff's questions. Mind you now, the Justice Department and other executive agencies consistently refuse to produce records to Congress, claiming what we call deliberative process. When it comes to Trump, the usual order doesn't apply. Given the new executive privilege position that Biden administration has created here, it's entirely possible that at some point in the future, we could all be talking to President Biden's closest advisors about their internal deliberative process. Or is there a double standard? I have to laugh a little bit at that possibility, knowing how my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will complain about how such a decision to seek information is political in nature. With respect to Trump and what was said at these high-level meetings, those are the types of meetings where all kinds of things are discussed. That's the whole point. The president has every right to discuss ideas and strategies with his closest advisors. The president, whether that president is Democrat or Republican, should feel unrestrained to bring ideas to his closest staff for robust discussion. Eventually, the facts will come out, and Trump will have to address them, good or bad, depending on the facts at hand. However, the essential question that should be asked, what was the final decision? And that is my major concern about the recent public comments coming out of these interviews I've discussed relating to this new Trump investigation. Unlike my Democratic colleagues, I won't discuss the evidence publicly at this point in time. But let me remind the American public with a couple already public points. Did Trump fire Acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen? No, he did not fire him. Did Trump fire Rich Donahue, Rosen's deputy? No, he did not fire Rich Donahue. Also, on September 7th, 2021, CNN article states, quote, now this is about those interviews that I've been talking about that happened in the last week. From CNN, quote, the men testified that in their interactions with Trump, I better start over again or we'll get this wrong. Quote, the man testified that in their interactions with Trump, he didn't order them to do anything illegal and eventually accepted their advice that the Justice Department couldn't take action to claim fraud when it had no evidence of it. In other words, that's the end of quote. I want to just interpret. Claim fraud in the last presidential election because there was no evidence of fraud. Incredibly, one of the same committee Democrats who spread the Trump lie today said criminal prosecutions could come out of this investigation. If the facts eventually fit the Democrats' narrative that they so badly want to be true of their narrative, then they fit. It is what it is. But I haven't seen anything backing up their misleading conclusions from either what I saw at the interviews or what my staff has reported to me from those interviews over the last week. Now, until that point comes, that the Democratic narrative proves out to be what they want it to be, the Democrats should quit trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and they need to stop violating committee rules and protocols. Why? Because of this, why would any witness want to testify now at the risk that their words being leaked and twisted to satisfy a partisan agenda? Facts and evidence matter, not speculative partisan cheap shots. I yield the floor. No, I don't yield. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Madam President. I am here to talk about the Build Back Better